Welcome to J Lowe Artist YouTube channel. Today we're doing watercolors on 300 series cold press illustration board. It's a lot of fun, it's good practice, and we'll be learning some techniques of just direct painting. Nothing really advanced or anything, but it's good practice. So come on along and do some painting with us. And remember, art makes life better. Okay, let's try something a little more complex. Start out with a circle about the size of a golf ball. And I'm going to be doing quite a bit of erasing with this just because I don't like to see the pencil through the paint. Some people are okay with that. So I've got my kneaded eraser standing by. So we're going to do a lion. So I'm going to start out and I'm going to say, well, okay, if the lion comes down, he's got a mane that's going to come out over here. Maybe it comes down and then the mane kind of puffs up over his head. He's got his forehead and his nose. Nose is going to come out. Just you can do almost like a little rectangular shape there for his nose. But then give him kind of a little curve right there. There's his nose. His mouth is going to be open. We can do teeth on that mouth too if we want to. And then he's got this little beard that kind of puffs up there. We can put teeth on there if we want to. You could even have a little tongue coming out. If you do a heraldic lion, you guys know what heraldry is? You can add a little eye in there. You just do this little kind of Nike swoosh and a little half moon underneath it. There's an eye. And somewhere behind his eye is this ear. You could do like just a little half circle there for his ear. And if you want to, you could even put some little lines to say, well, this is where his mane kind of comes out away from his head, like this. Kind of comes down and curves. Might even have a little line there where his jowls kind of go up. Maybe a little line for his nose. And break that edge of that circle kind of with these little curved triangular shapes. There's our lion. We're just going to do a lion head. We're going to do this all in metallics. So from here, I'm going to erase what I don't like. So like my initial simple shape, erase that, get rid of this. When you're water painting, it's going to pick up whatever you've drawn and fix it to the surface. So I got to get rid of that. So now we need the core shadow that's in there. And you can put this anywhere you want to. I kind of like to put it towards the middle. But rather than draw a straight line, you got to think, well, if this metal, if it's carved out and it's kind of bumpy, then maybe I'm going to have like a little curve right here, a little curve right here, maybe a double curve where that curve meets up with this little curve here. Maybe it's going to kind of come up here and curve here. This is also kind of random, but that's where my core is going to be. So remember, right above that core is going to be light, and then up in here we're going to have some color. You can, if you want to, also put some little highlights on some of these curves. Okay, just like with our teapot that we looked at, there might be some little curves up above there. I'm thinking my nose is sticking out a little long, so I'm gonna take off that nose a little bit. Ah, that's better. There's a little tongue hanging out there. And we could put in some teeth there, but we can do that. We can do that in a little bit later. All right, now we're ready for the paint. And again, we're going to start out with that core shadow that's in there. I'm going to get a little water on my brush. Hopefully my brush is nice and clean. Test it to make sure it's clean. So you dip it once in the water. And then, oh, I had some red paint on there. So clean out your brush. Make sure it's nice and clean. Now what I'm going to do is get some water, and I'm just going to do along that core shadow area, up in there and along there, along here, maybe a little bit on the tongue, and then just bring that down a little bit like this. So now I've got water just there where that core is. And I'm going to grab a tiny, tiny bit of black. I don't need much black. Just the very tip of your brush. I mean, there's hardly any there. You can always go back in and get more paint. So I'm just going to grab that and put that in there. Let it fuzz out. Let it do its fuzzy thing. Add a little bit more black to it. There's a little core there. And just let it fuzz. Let it do its thing. See how it kind of moves its way into that paint? You can always add more if you need it. I'm going to add a little bit on the bottom, just here and there. You can kind of pick and choose where that goes. Anything on the bottom is going to make it look like a shadow. I can also, if I wanted to, right along the bottom of his eye, I might want to put a little bit of black in there, just a little bit, just to give it a little bit of dimension there. Maybe along his eyebrow, maybe in his nose, maybe a little bit on the bottom of some of those lines I've drawn. Just a tiny bit. You can always get more. Under his ear. Anything on the bottom. This is going to make it kind of look like a drop shadow. So think about metal as if it's reflecting whatever's down here, whatever's down, it's going to look kind of dark. You can also take, and when your pigment is gone, take your brush, dip it once in the water, and you can bring some of that down. You can fuzz it out, paint a little bit along there. Don't force it. It's very soft. That's one thing I like about the whole idea of water paint. You can make it very soft. And if you think, oh, I wish that core shadow was a little darker, you could always add more. We're going to add some other colors into that, but if you think to yourself, want it a little darker, you can take a little bit of that black just on the very, very top. Add a little bit more. Remember, it's that value, that high contrast that makes metal look like metal. And so I want that little bit of darkness in there. Watercolors, by the way, when they dry lighter than you lay them in. Just a tiny bit. Don't need much. Okay, so now we have our core established. We know that this is all going to be a little bit darker than that at the top. And you don't have to use these colors. Any color is going to work. If we wanted this to be green, we could do it with green. But we want our lion to look gold. So golds are going to be your yellows, your oranges, your reds. And so we want that kind of everywhere. I'm going to clean out my brush a little bit. I have a tiny bit of black on there. I'm just going to clean that out. Because again, we want that brush nice and clean. And now I want this, the top here to be fairly light. So maybe I'll use a little orange or a little yellow. And I could even bring that all down in here. This is going to be a little darker. So maybe more orange and red down here, more yellow up at the top. So I'm going to start out at the top. And I'm just going to do some water. This is going to fuzz it out. And remember, if you want some highlights in there, you want to leave those highlights white. So I'm not even going to put water where I want my highlights. I want a little highlight along his eyebrow, maybe a little one on his nose, maybe one on his ear right there. And you want right above the dark area, you want it to stay white. So don't put any water there. Just bring your water down there. Maybe a little highlight on his tongue too right there. That might be kind of neat. So then I'm going to dip it once in the yellow. I just need a tiny bit of yellow. And now I'm going to hit that right up there. And just let it fuzz out. Let it do its thing. And you don't have to go everywhere with it. Just a little here and there. As it comes down, right above that core shadow, you need to leave it white. Leave it white. No color down in there. Just leave it white. I can go in the whole bottom area too and add some yellow to that. So I'm going to add yellow to that. Notice I didn't get it wet. Because I want some pure yellow in there. Just nice and yellowy. Now I can start adding some more color to it. To warm it up a little bit, I'm going to add some orange to it. So again, I want to make sure my brush is dry. And because there's a lot of yellow in orange, I'm not going to worry about cleaning it so much. I just need it to be dry so that I don't get yellow into my orange. So I'm just going to dip into my orange there and start out at the top and work my way down. And I can do a little bit on the bottom, but remember to leave yourself a little bit of reflected light in between. Start out at the top. A little reflected light. So the bottom. Now, while there's a little tiny bit of orange on your brush, you've probably got a little bit of orange and yellow mixed in with your brush. You can actually go to the top with that orange too. And so you can go in and do a little bit of tracery along there, just a little bit. You don't need much. Any of the darker areas, into that yellow. You can always add more if you need it. Now I can take my brush and just dip it in the water and manipulate that a little bit. Move it around. I need a little more orange in there, right here. Now just some water, just clean water. Now I can manipulate that, and hopefully it's going to be kind of smooth and nice. And remember to keep that white right above that core shadow. And anywhere else you feel like you need a little bit of light. So here I'm just manipulating some of that color I've already laid in there. And it just needs to be light and soft. It's just water. And this will also tighten up things, make things look a little bit better. I still need some more color down in here, so I'm going to try some red in there. I'm going to lay that red in, and it's going to kind of look like he's bleeding here for a minute until I get some water and manipulate that around. Notice how very little water paint we're using, just a tiny bit. Now he looks kind of like he's bleeding, but I'm just going to take clean water, and I'm going to touch my brush into the clean water, and I'm going to manipulate that down into the yellow. And of course, it's going to turn a little more orange. And that's okay. Now I'm just going to manipulate that down into it. Don't be afraid to wipe your brush off often, because sometimes you just get too much water in there. And if you want, you can take a little bit of that and move it up into some of those little crevices that we've created up in there. So it looks kind of bumpy. And if you want, add a little bit of that purple to the darkest areas. Let's try it and see if that works. I'm just going to clean out my brush. The final thing is just add a tiny bit of purple to it. And because that purple is going to mix it a little bit in with the yellow, it's going to turn kind of a muted brown. It's not going to look so bright purple. Again, that's kind of up to you as the artist. You kind of decide how much of that you're going to put in there. But it gives it a nice metallic-y kind of a shine. And this is not hard. Hopefully you guys are looking at this going, hey, Mr. Lowe, that's much easier than I thought it was going to be. And it does take a little bit of practice. It's like anything else. Now I'm just cleaning up my edges, putting a little bit of that purple around the edges to keep them nice and sharp. And you kind of pick and choose where you do that. It doesn't have to go everywhere. Okay, what do you think? Is that easier than you thought it was going to be? Some of that I added too much to it, so I'm going to take a little bit out. Just clean water. You just touch it, and you dry it off, and your brush will pull it out for you. There's some reflected light right at the bottom there. Okay, so there's our lion. Hopefully you had a fun experience today and learned something maybe, and even tried something that you've never done before. And hopefully somewhere along the way it's made your life a little bit better, because art makes life better.